separate debates, around 40 minutes for the Treasurer debate. We're going to hear from our two candidates for the Treasurer position, which is Deepa Driver from the University of Reading and Andrew Feeney from Northumbria University. We're then going to have a 5 or 10 minute comfort break, and then we'll start the vice presidential debate. And we have the two candidates, which is Dyfrig Jones from the University of Bangor and Rhiannon Lockley from Birmingham City University. We are recording this meeting, and the intention is to post this to a YouTube channel afterwards and make the recording available to members at the various branches across Yorkshire and Humberside. My intention is to try and speak as little as possible to facilitate members asking questions. If we're a bit slow to get started, I do have 1 or 2 questions to kick us off with. And in the sake of, or in the interest of hearing as much from the candidates as possible, we're going to ask people to put their questions in the question box rather than ask them verbally. Each candidate will have a 3-minute opening statement and a 2-minute closing statement. Candidates should expect to be asked about 5 to 7 questions in between those opening and closing statements. Apart from the opening statement, candidates will have 2 minutes to respond to questions. When you're getting close to the 2-minute mark, about 20 seconds off, I will wave my hands to let people know that they need to be bringing their comments to a conclusion. And I think it goes without saying, but it's important to state nonetheless, we want a reasonable and reasoned debate where candidates are respectful. We may have political differences, but we're all part of the same union, and ultimately we're all working towards the same ends. So in terms of kicking off the Treasurer debate, would either of our candidates like to go first with their 3-minute opening statement? Or I can just pick someone. How about yourself, Andrew, if we kick off with yourself?
Okay, yeah, you can hear me? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, I'll just say 3 things very briefly, a bit about myself, a bit about the role of Treasurer, and a bit about UCU more widely. For those of you who don't have my statement, I've been active in UCU and its predecessor since 2000, for about 25 years, mainly as branch secretary and vice chair. The most important part of that job has been to build the branch. We've got a very vibrant, very engaged branch at Northumbria that we're very proud of. I've also done the full range of duties and dealt with masses of casework, negotiated policies, and so forth. In terms of industrial action, and we've had ballot and taken industrial action several times. During the COVID, when we couldn't get a decent agreement about working and safety preventions, we balloted, and we were the first branch of any trade union in Britain to successfully win a ballot on the COVID situation. More recently last year, when Northumbria was facing a redundancy situation and management wouldn't agree to no compulsory redundancies, we balloted again, and management withdrew and agreed to no compulsory redundancies for UCU. Unfortunately, they wouldn't do the same for Unison because I guess they hadn't taken the same line of action as us. As far as the role of Treasurer goes, I see it primarily as ensuring the financial health of the union. Without that, there is nothing. That involves giving advice, and particularly on implications of decisions to committees and conference, ensuring that due diligence is properly done. I've been involved in the national situation. I was on the NEC in 2006, the first UCU one, and again since 2021, I've been vice chair of the Higher Education Committee, a national negotiator. I was part of the delegation last year to TUC. NEC can be very fractious, but I think I've been able to work very well with everybody I've encountered, from the General Secretary, who I hope would agree, as well as other officials and officers. I've always felt it's more important to defend UCU and our members than it is about any internal fights. In terms of the priorities and importance and the future of UCU, we've got to maintain our campaigning. role. We've got to campaign for members in terms of equality, protecting our minority groups, highlighting and ensuring protection against sexual violence. We need to focus continually, as ever, on precarity, hoping that the government might be more sympathetic than previous ones on that. I think that overlaps into the industrial arena, where we've got very different priorities. FE, it's a case still of just building up national bargaining. HE, we've got terrible financial crisis, the pensions. Adult and prisons have got real issues with precarity and genuine real safety, physical safety. But all of this is irrelevant unless we are united and we listen to members. It's easy for activists to get policies and whatever through committees and through conferences, but all of that means nothing if we don't bring the members with us. If we don't reflect the priorities and concerns of our members, then it's all ultimately in vain. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you. Thank you for keeping to time there. Thank you for that opening statement. I'll now go to Deepa Driver and ask her to make her opening statement. And again, 3 minutes, Deepa.
Thanks, Bob. Can you hear me?
We can.
Brilliant. Thank you. I'd like to start firstly by wishing everybody, and all those, particularly those who are celebrating, a happy Chinese New Year. We are part of a very diverse and vibrant union, and I'm proud as a Black, disabled, minority ethnic, first-generation immigrant woman to serve on the NEC of our union and to have served as Vice Chair of the Higher Education Committee, Chair of the Legal Panel, and Chair of Negotiators on the USS Pension Scheme, a role that I currently still hold. During this time, my experience of working in UCU and with our members has been very, very different depending upon the circumstances that members are in. But one thing has been very clear. We know that our union is a member-led union. So we're not interested in divesting all responsibility, paying our subs to some central body monolithic somewhere else and letting everybody else just work as part of some get services from this union. Instead, what we have always tried to build in our union is a space where members can have polite, intelligent, helpful debate on the kinds of issues that are facing us, whether it is precarity, whether it is discrimination, whether it is poor pay or poor pensions. And that's kind of guided how I have tried to be as a union activist. Firstly, it's really important to me that we perform the democratic will of the members of our union. And that doesn't mean just simply plebiscites where we ask members a question. It means engaging with members on a day-to-day basis, understanding the issues on the ground, providing members in a timely way with information. And that timely information is also important on the financial side. As a national officer, as treasurer, my role will be to keep you informed of how we are going to support your action or your decisions. And that's really, really important because when we make a decision as a branch or to take action, then we want our union with us. We want them to support us. We never take these decisions lightly. And it's really important that the treasurer facilitates members standing up for themselves when they need to. But it's also important, while doing so, that the treasurer correctly informs everybody of the real health of the union so that we know when we can fight and when we have to use other means. I think one of the challenges that our members face in participating in UCU is the broader challenge of this sector, which is excessive workload. People want to participate in their union, but they find that they aren't able to participate because work is so heavy that, sometimes it's easier to say, oh, well, I'll just get on with it and see how things go.
But as you conclude, Deepa.
Thank you. But I'll just a final sentence, which is that as a union, we have to deal with these issues. We have to allow people to participate. And together, we have to do everything we can to confront employers, to deal with them in a way that protects members. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much to both candidates for those opening statements. I've had a look at the Q&A. There are no questions in there yet, so I'm going to start with some of my backup questions. However, I realise that while we're a small meeting, we're not a meeting of only myself and the candidates. So if people have questions that they think would be useful to put to candidates, please do put them in the question box. So I guess the ones that I'm going to open with, or the first one that I'm going to open with, considering we're talking about the position of honorary treasurer, is candidates' understanding of the current financial position of the union. What is candidates' understanding of the current financial position of the union? And in the interests of fairness, if we start with yourself, Deepa, as Andrew went first in the first round, for this one you have 2 minutes, and again I'll give you a wave when you're getting close to time. So in your own time, Deepa.
Thanks, Bob. I guess one of the important things that members don't realize when they often don't realize when they're voting for treasurer is that the treasurer is, of course, overseeing things, but in general, there is a very well-functioning team within UCU that manages the finances of the union. So what the treasurer is doing is helping to ensure that the democratic will of members matches the financial position of the union as a whole. To do this, the treasurer needs to understand how the union is doing. And if you look at the accounts of the union, you will see that we are talking in terms of amounts which are in the tens of millions. And when we're talking of these kinds of sums of money, it's really important that we understand how that money is distributed. In 2 minutes, it's perhaps a little bit ambitious to go over the accounts of the union, but perhaps what would be helpful is for me to say that I have previously served as a financial regulator and as a banker. More recently, I have chaired our discussions on the UCU side, on the union side, for the USS pensions negotiations. What has become apparent to me in all these years of service is that sometimes the accounts are a point in time estimation of where things are, whereas actually what we need to understand is the holistic picture of how the union funds are collected and how they are deployed, and whether when they are deployed, they're serving the interests of members. And how do we decide whether they're serving the interests of members? Well, we understand the positions of regions and nations, and also conference, Congress, and the positions from our branches. Branches do an extraordinary amount of work, as the AG sector is currently in a crisis, and a crisis not made by its staff, a crisis made by the senior management of institutions that are misusing their positions of responsibility
Thanks.
to undermine our institutions. So as treasurer, I would like to help members understand things in that space. Thanks.
Thank you, Deepa. Okay, I notice a couple of people who've just joined us, so welcome. We are in the midst of the first debate today, which is the treasurer debate. We've heard opening statements from the candidates. We are now on the question, what is your understanding of the current financial position of the union? I'll bring Andrew in a moment, but for those who've just joined us, if you have questions you want to ask, please put them in the Q&A box. So if I can bring yourself in, Andrew, your understanding of the current financial position of the union.
Okay, thank you. Well, the UCU finances are out there in the public record. And currently, I think we, unlike most of the institutions that we work for, certainly those that I'm familiar with in higher education, our past treasurers, David and Steve prior to him, have left us in a relatively stable situation. Since the merger of the two unions, they've managed the change in premises and the property portfolio, and the union appears to be its income and its expenditure are currently reasonably balanced. And of course, UCU is very limited as to how it can draw on an income, and it's essentially the subs of members. And there is pressure constantly, obviously, to raise those subs, but the danger of that will obviously be that you'll put some people off, and people will choose to leave. I think we're moving towards a more structured level of subs, which is a good thing to do, and I think we're probably somewhere around about the proper position on that at the moment. In terms of our expenditure, we've obviously got a large and very hardworking and very efficient staff base, and there are constant pressures. In addition to that, obviously, that's our prime expenditure. But in addition to that, there are constant pressures. People want to increase campaigning. People want to increase demonstrations and marches. People want to draw on the fighting fund. But when our only income is essentially our subs, we've got to be careful and show, as I mentioned earlier, due diligence on how we do that. And the fighting fund in particular is not an infinite resource that we can just say a national dispute in higher education. Well, we'll support all of our members going out on strike. It's very, very limited as to support we can give that. What the fighting fund is really good for is for supporting people in smaller disputes of national importance. And of course, we've got to keep up and maintaining our campaigning and our presence. But these things, it is the job of the Treasurer to ensure that they don't put us into any situation of financial precarity.
Thank you for that, Andrew. Thank you for that statement. So again, for those of you joining us, we do have a Q&A box at the bottom. Please do drop your questions into that Q&A box. Otherwise, you'll only be hearing from my questions for the duration of the debate. And I think it would be good to bring some other voices in. But while we're waiting for some other volunteers to come forward, I will ask a follow-up question, which is around what should the union be spending its money on. Now, I'm well aware that the honorary treasurer is not, the final say in terms of the financial direction of the union. That is obviously a collective decision, but I think members would be interested in hearing what the candidates' priorities would be in terms of the spending of the union. So if, again, we can reverse the order. So if we start with Andrew on that question for 2 minutes, please, Andrew.
Okay. I think I probably just answered a lot of that in my previous answer there. So our biggest expenditure is on our staffing, and that's obviously something that we've got to maintain. Our regional officers are under a lot of pressure. They do an excellent job, our regional officials and all the support officials involved there. And we've got to ensure that we maintain that the experience and the dedication of those people's both throughout the regions, the devolved nations, and also in the headquarters based in Carlo Street. So that's a very important thing. We've got to be very careful about. As I said, the other things we can broadly split into more general campaigning, which is very, very important. And we've got to be aware that it's not just, let's say, because higher education is so much in the news at the moment, and there will be some decision from Bridget Phillipson sometime later this year about funding, because it just cannot continue unaddressed for another year. Then what we can do to campaign on that is very important, but we can't then neglect the campaigning that we do on other issues, and that's got to be involved in, as I say, protecting our minority groups, including migrants, our minority groups, and including our campaigning on areas to do with equality and so forth. And also in the industrial arena, it's not just higher education. There's also campaigns that will go on every year in further education. As I say, national bargaining isn't even properly established there, so there'll be many more local disputes, as well as adult and prison, where the precarity is if anything, is even worse, and there is much work to be done there. So that's it, really.
Thank you, Andrew, and within time, so that's great. Deeper, the same question to yourself. What should the financial priorities of the union be?
We're in a situation where in prisons, our colleagues are experiencing very difficult working situations, and it's the same in adult and community education. One of the challenges is the broader narrative of austerity that is being made to see, the propaganda around it that is being made to say that education, which actually offers social mobility, social justice, is not as important as it should be. And part of our wider campaigning work has to be about encouraging a broader understanding of the importance of education to the growth agenda, to social justice, etc. So if we bring in about 20 million worth of income, then a certain proportion of that will have to go on the campaigning. It's also important to realize that when members are in dispute, when members are experiencing legal difficulty, when members are finding that employers are stealing their pensions, then the union has to stand behind members. And it has to make itself robust enough to stand behind members. And part of that is deciding what we prioritize. So in times of distress, the union must prioritize standing by members. You will know in Yorkshire and Humber and elsewhere that many universities are under huge amounts of stress, and they're instead of dealing with the white elephant projects, instead of dealing with their bad management of finances, the cost is being borne by staff and students. So part of our effort this year and in the years ahead has to be about affecting that onslaught and addressing it where necessary through industrial action, where necessary through political campaigning, and where necessary through education. In addition, the national officers of this union have to do everything it takes to support members. And members can only make good decisions when we are honest about the position of our union, i.e., we don't keep planning for a rainy day when the rainy day is happening. So we need to be able to tell members, we have the money to support you, or hey, we can afford to go on these many days. This is how much more we have to raise in donations and contributions in order for us to do what members want.
Thank you, Deepa.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, we've just run out of time there. Okay, thank you for those answers. Very positively, we now have a question from someone else who isn't me, so that is good to hear. We have Sandy James, who's at the University of Leeds. And if I can just ask, when you're posing questions, if you can just say which branch you're from, I think is helpful. So Sandy says, for the honorary treasurer candidates, how can we increase accountability of committees in the union, e.g. NEC, HEC, FEC, as regards finance? So increasing accountability of the committees of the union as regards finance. And again, we'll reverse the order. So if we begin with Deepa, and you have 2 minutes.
So I guess there are various spaces, Sandy, where we can engage with the kind of accountability we expect from those in positions of influence and importance in our union. And you have particularly asked about the committees, but of course, the wider union bureaucratic structure as well needs similar scrutiny. One of the spaces where we do this is conference and Congress. Congress in particular, because that's where the accounts are received and we understand how the union has spent its money. But the accounts are, of course, a point-in-time estimation, and much of the evaluation of how the union is doing and how it's accountable is done when we, as members, scrutinize what our branches are doing, ensure that our branches participate in regional and national debates, and ensure that the NEC, in the motions it takes and how people vote in various motions in terms of either raising money through progressive subscriptions or unprogressive, regressive subscriptions, or spending that money in terms of supporting members when they are in difficulty, or thinking ahead before we are in difficulty to create the path for a secure and well-maintained and well-run higher education, further education, prison education, adult and community education system, post-16 education as a whole, That's how we gain that accountability. And that accountability doesn't come from outside. It comes from us paying attention to how our union behaves and voting accordingly to ensure that those at the top of our union know we are looking. And that's how we do it. We also have various other mechanisms, of course, through our regional committees, through our branch committees, through national democratic means to hold those in positions of responsibility accountable. And I think we should invite them to our branches to explain to us what they have done to further our needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Deepa. Thank you. And so the same question to Andrew about the accountability of committees as regards finance.
Okay. Well, I guess the principle of accountability is that the accounts are published, are in the public record. The Treasurer makes a report to Congress every year on how those committees have spent the money that we've raised through your members' subs. So I guess that's the way that it's visible to members. I think it's the duty of the Treasurer to ensure that committees are aware of the implications of decisions they make in terms of the financial consequences, and ultimately to ensure that they do not put the union into a position of financial precarity. I think that's an obligation on the Treasurer to ensure that that doesn't happen. Beyond that, I think the committees, well, ultimately are accountable because they are democratic and because the members are elected. Now, the turnout for those elections is not high. We try in our branch, and I'm sure many other branches do, to try and increase that turnout. And I'm sure there are many thoughts about how to do that. That is a really important thing, and it's a really big issue that faces our union. Other ways you can make those committees accountability. Well, there's currently motions at NEC to make voting records public for the members for the officers who've been elected. That hasn't been authorised yet, as I understand it. It hasn't been agreed by those committees, but it's something currently under discussion, and I think that would be an additional way to show accountability. Not without its problems, but it would certainly probably help.
Thank you, Andrew, and well within time. And just to clarify that when I'm waving, I'm waving when you've got 30 seconds to go. So I realised perhaps that wasn't absolutely clear at the beginning. We do have another question which has been asked in the chat from Rachel Wars at the University of Leeds. Hello, a question for both candidates. I'm wondering, should I say, how you would engage with members in all sectors. So I think candidates have touched on this briefly, but I think we're conscious both candidates are from the higher education sector. So I think this question is about how we reach out and how we represent our membership in other sectors. And we'll start with Andrew.
Okay, all sectors. Yeah. Yeah, it must be very annoying for members when the news reports and says UCU, the lecturers union, is doing such and such a thing, because a large number of our members, very possibly the majority, are not university lecturers. So we do have a very diverse membership. We've got adult and prisons, we've got FE, we've got post-92 and pre-92 HE. In the pre-92 HE, we've also got academic related who aren't lecturers who work in professional support services there. And I think we just need to be aware that that's what makes up our union. And from a treasurer's point of view, we've got to ensure that simply because the majority of our members are from HE, that does not entitle HE to take the majority of, let's say, a fighting fund, for example, because HE happens to be in a difficult national dispute. The other areas have got to have protected funding for campaigning for issues that are unique to them. There are issues in prison education that are unique to prison education. and there are problems in FE that are unique to FE. So like how we reach out to those individuals is through building support in those branches and ensuring that all of our branches have healthy memberships, or have active officers in them, and they are represented properly at the national committees and at National Congress.
Thank you, Andrew. And then the same question to Deepa, so about engaging with all sectors.
Thank you. Firstly, thank you for that question. I think it's really important. I've tried my best in the past years to do what it takes to really understand what is going on in the other sectors. For example, I regularly try to attend the prison officers conference because it is a sector which is different from mine, and I want to understand what they are doing. Similarly, I regularly engage with FE colleagues, both in various branches. I've spoken at various branches and answered member questions, but I've also engaged with the different committees and others who write to me or email me or phone me to say they have issues with X, could I help out, those kinds of things. I think the one thing I would be very, very keen to do is to ensure that we recognize the strength and leverage of having a four-nation, multi-region, multi-sectoral union. And part of that is recognizing that when FE wins, HE wins. When ACE wins, when prisons win, we all win. And when we are seen as a strong union, when we support members in all these different sectors across the different job roles that they have, we all win together. So as treasurer, it will be my privilege and responsibility to ensure that we never trade off one group of members against the other, because we recognize that members in distress, wherever they are, need support. The other thing that I do or try to do is to attend regional committee meetings and also meetings with various branches. I represent the South currently, and there I attend various meets when branches invite me. But one of the other things I have done is served on the Academic Related and Professional Services Staff Committee, as well as on the Retired Members Committee. And there, having not been from those roles, it was very useful to try and understand what members are facing, because I clearly don't bring the expertise there. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Okay, and I'm having a look around in the chat and the Q&A. I haven't seen a further question, so again, I'll ask one that I have prepared. I think this will be our final question, and then I'll ask candidates to make their closing statements. So the final question, and I think candidates have touched on this, but I think it could be expanded upon in a little bit more detail. It's about the policy context, the political situation. Obviously, sectors are in crisis, as I think both candidates have indicated. And what are the big political challenges for the union in terms of how we respond to that? So I'll invite Deepa to go first, again for 2 minutes.
So we're living in a society where there is an increase in surveillance, in the misuse of anti-terrorism legislation, in various kinds of misuse of the law to silence dissent and to silence criticism of whether it is genocide or whether it is apartheid or whether it is other form or serious forms of corruption that we see around the world. And those underlying situations are creating fertile ground for the rise of the far right, but also for people to feel disillusioned and disenchanted and step away from broader, political engagement. And when people step away from that political engagement, then those who are in positions of power, who are misusing that power, get to use it freely. So as a trade union, I think we have to engage in class-based struggles, uniting working people, standing with other unions, standing with other community groups, standing up against things like the genocide that is currently going on, in order to ensure that We bring people together and improve the conditions of working people. And the conditions of working people improve when we have secure jobs, decent pay, decent pensions. And this is really important when people are not casualized, suffering from excessive workload, discriminated against in their workplace every day. When I was sitting on the legal panel as its chair, I have seen situations of prison colleagues being horrendously harassed in the workplace. Our FE colleagues being in situations where the discrimination is so visible that you cannot believe this is happening in an educational institution. Similarly, across higher education, where we see, you know, a kind of elitist mindset sometimes, we are also seeing people ground down to the very least. And in these situations, it's very important, given this broader political context of austerity and the rise of the far right, for the union movement to stand strong with working people and in international solidarity
Thank you.
against war, against apartheid, against genocide,
Thank you,
in
Deepa.
support of decent pay, decent working conditions, and fair lives for everybody around the world.
Thank you. I'll ask you to conclude there. And the same question to Andrew about how the union responds to the political and policy context at present.
Okay. I'm going to limit 2 minutes. I'm going to limit myself to the national context. I think, sorry, I think what's, so I've got through some noise there. Okay, one of the things about the current situation is that we have had a change of government last year, and that has to be a potential, at least for opportunity, in respect of two areas. One is funding. The higher education system cannot continue in its current funding model. It just cannot do that. There has to be a change. And we've got an opportunity, at least, to press, to campaign, to lobby for a change that is in a direction in which we want to see that happening. Similarly, there is the opportunity for further education funding, particularly, for example, the matching of salaries to school teachers. If the FE system really is to thrive, and all this talk about apprenticeships and so forth is to be realised. So there is an issue of funding that is tricky. The government is constantly going about how little money it's got. The other area, of course, is the trade union laws. The government has committed to reform of those laws. It got a good reception at the Trade Union Congress this year, but we've yet to see how that's going to be implemented. So if somebody could mute whoever's there, I'm just getting this background noise coming through.
Sorry, is that someone on this call? If people
It's
can
not
just
it's not
check.
me. It's some background noise coming through.
Apologies for that.
It's just a bit distracting there. Sorry. Yeah. So we've got the opportunity to campaign for trade union laws, and it's that will help us to build stronger branches. And it's within branches that we're able to defend our members the best, just to resist high stress workloads, to help people who resist forms of what about oppression from management, from minorities being discriminated against. So in terms of the national policy, we have opportunities. They're not easy. The international situation is absolutely awful, and the government change in America is going to have very negative consequences, I think. But we've got to try and take what opportunities we can at the moment. And if we don't do that, if trade unions aren't able to take this opportunity and to become stronger and to help people unite and realize ambitions and improve their working lives, then people will just continue to become disillusioned. And we can see the increase in potential vote for reform at the minute, which is just astonishing, and particularly among the young people, apparently incredibly alarming.
Thank you, Andrew. So thank you for that. So I did give you a bit longer for that response, Andrew, because of the disruption there, and apologies for that. I think we thought it was coming from within your house, but if I could just ask our co-hosts just to monitor people who are on the call and make sure everyone is muted. Okay, so I'm going to ask candidates to move to their closing statements. So we have, again, roughly a couple of minutes for summing up. So Andrew, if you would like to go first.
Okay, thank you. I think the two questions, I mean, thank you very much for your chairing, Bob, and your very interesting questions. But the two that actually came from members were about accountability and accountability across sectors. And I think that is a really important thing. Deepa, in her introduction, referred to UCU being member-led. And my fear is that that really isn't always the case. We are in a very dangerous, we're in danger of becoming an activist-led union. And the turnout for elections is really disappointingly low. And we have committees and congresses that sometimes behave as if they haven't really taken regard of the memberships. And you can see that sometimes in conference decisions. There was a decision at conference a couple of years ago to do with an international dispute. And regardless of the rights or the wrongs of that, it was just so obvious that that was not reflecting the majority of our members' concerns. And we got resignations locally about that. And this happens from time to time. So I think we've got to try and ensure that we are really member-led and not just led by those people who seek to be active in the higher positions in the union. And that's got to be true across all of our sectors. And once we can demonstrate that we can build branches, we can protect people at work, then I think we can ask them to support us in our wider political campaigning beyond immediate areas that have consequences for people at work. So yeah, that's my big take from it. We need to be more engaged with our membership and reflect our members' concerns.
Thank you very much, Andrew, and that was within time. So thank you very much. And then move into Deepa for the final time. So again, for your closing statement.
Thank you, Bob. Firstly, I'd like to thank Yorkshire and Humber region. It's really important we have hustings like this so that you can get to know people like us before we take on positions of responsibility in the union. And I'm here to make sure, as a candidate, to ensure that we have a healthy, well-functioning democratic union. Now, when we vote nationally in national elections, not even UCU, we don't say that this fraction of people who vote in those elections are activists and we don't care what they think. We care about everybody, and those who vote define the direction of where we're going. And so what we need to do if we want a healthy, well-functioning union is to encourage more people to participate in the democratic processes. And the reason people participate in democratic processes is when they do so either because they have a grievance, they have an issue, or they want to better somebody else's conditions or their own. And finally, they vote and they participate in democratic decisions when they know that they have a system and a structure that listens to their views. As a treasurer, I promise to listen to your views, to understand them, to provide you with information so you can refine them, and to take your decisions and implement them effectively. That's where sometimes things have gone wrong in our union, where members have said something and we haven't implemented it effectively. So it's really important to me that the treasurer role facilitates the national officers, the NEC, and the vice president and the presidential team implementing through the general secretary and the bureaucracy what members want. And what members want is they're not looking for an insurance policy simply from the union. They want a union that thinks progressively about the things they care about. And part of that is engaging with members, but part of that is also participating. This morning, I was on the Strand as part of a demo organized to defend 16 people who have been arrested in relation to protest.
Thank you, Deepa.
And so that's how I would participate as a trade unionist. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you very much. Okay, I mean, first of all, I would like to thank both candidates for engaging respectfully in debate and for sharing your perspectives on the challenges that the union is facing and how the union might best respond. So thank you very much. These are obviously very important events. turnout in union elections, as we know, is an issue across the labour movement, and anything we can do to try and open up our processes is obviously very helpful. So again, I'd like to thank the candidates for their participation in this debate. We will now have a 10-minute break, a 10-minute breather for people before we turn to the VP debate with Diffrig Jones and Rhiannon Lockley. So yeah, everyone can have take a comfort break, and we will come back at 1:05. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bob.
Cheers.
Thanks, Bob.
Hi there. I think we've got, well, we'll give a minute or so for people to come back into the meeting before we commence the second debate, the debate between the candidates for the position of National Vice President. I think we are still recording. Wait for one of my co-hosts to confirm. Yeah, thank you, Vicky. Okay, so I'll just have a very quick run through the structure again. So we're going to hear from two candidates for the position of National Vice President. We have Diffrig Jones from University of Bangor and Rhiannon Lockley at Birmingham City University. We are recording this meeting. We are streaming via YouTube for those members who could not attend in person. Each candidate will get a 3-minute opening statement and a 2-minute closing statement. Again, we'll hope to get through about 5 or 6 questions, I think, for each candidate. Each response will be timed to 2 minutes. I will wave my hand when you have 30 seconds to go. Again, I mean, I can try and find a coin and toss a coin, but is there any candidate who wants to speak first? Perhaps we'll go with Rhiannon this time, if that's okay. So 3 minutes for this opening statement. I will wave my hands when you have 30 seconds to go. So in your own time, Rhiannon.
Thanks, Bob. Hello, and thank you for welcoming us and organising the hustings. Solidarity to all the candidates attending and to all branches, including those facing attack in this region: Sheffield, Hallam, Hull, Huddersfield, York St John, all organising for better in our FE, ACE and Prison Ed branches here too. I was brought up as a trade unionist, but my journey into activism happened when I was a young mum to 2 little children, when our Halesowen College branch secretary was victimised in a big attack on the union, and we were suddenly left without branch leadership. I wasn't ready to give more to the union, but it was a case of needing to take a stand. That winter, I saw the very best of what UCU has to offer. It was frightening trying to organise as a new young branch leader, but I was never alone. UCU activists around the UK stood with us and looked after us, and we were welcomed and supported on regional tours, including Yorks and Humber region. I was humbled and grateful for all the support that seemed to spring from nowhere, but which I now know was the impact of having a proper activist organising structure in UCU. The hope and strength we channel together is something we should never lose sight of. Since then, I've gone on to chair West Midlands, BCU, serve on NEC, and I currently chair the Equality Committee for UCU. I'll always see equality as central to trade unionism. My background's widening participation. I've worked in access. I'm studying for a doctorate, and I'm a lone parent of 2 teenagers. I firmly believe in education as a public good. I'm standing for election on a platform of building a united, member-led, democratic UCU. A candidate elected to VP needs to be able to chair the union in a way which upholds democracy and builds unity. These are urgent priorities for UCU. I've fought local disputes and built one of the biggest post-92 branches while locked out of sector bargaining. I know how vital it is for our members to get clear messaging from leadership and how important it is for reps to be informed, supported and respected for the work done to mobilise members. We're seeing the education sector being dismantled, a threat not only to our members and students, but also to the principles of democracy and freedom in a time of increasingly powerful and unaccountable political forces. We must be united and confident in taking on this threat. We need to renew our strategies for engagement with the principles of labour organising still central. Members need space to share issues, to formulate demands collectively, debate and to vote on strategy. We must work together to re-establish confidence that UCU decisions will actually be implemented. UCU must continue to work in solidarity with workers around the world against genocide and scholasticide, and organise against the emboldened attacks on the marginalised in our workplaces and our communities. Our members are part of an international community. I support urgent resolution of the Unite dispute. UCU must model trade union values. My record is one of building consensus and unity. I act transparently and accountably, and I respect my mandate. These are the principles I'll uphold with your vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Rhiannon, perfectly in time. So now turning to Dyfrig, if you want to make your opening statement. Again, 3 minutes.
Thank you. And I haven't timed myself doing this because I've just rewritten it quite quickly now. I'm going to keep it really simple and straightforward, which is, I think, you know, most, if not all UCU members want pretty much the same thing. Secure employment, an end to sort of casual contracts, excessive workloads, workplace inequity. You know, and these are the kind of things that are endemic across all the sectors we represent. So, you know, we all want the same thing. The big question and the big disagreement really within UCU is not what we want, but how we get there. And these are massive, substantial differences between different wings, different factions within the union. And I think this election is really important because it is a fundamental choice between two approaches, right? Now, I don't want to focus too much on HE. I know we're all basically HE in this room, but it's being recorded, and this is an election for a cross-sectoral position. But I think we can look at what's going on in HE this very week, literally this week, as an example of big issue that we've got and how UCU has really lost its way. So higher education is at the point of collapse. Thousands upon thousands of members facing redundancy across the entirety of the UK. Now, what are we as a union doing in response? We are balloting members, asking them to take action for more pay, when some of our members don't know if they will be in a job in 3 months, 6 months, next year. And that is the result of a deliberate decision that was taken at HEC. Right, there was a choice to ballot on pay, and many of us argued against it, myself included, because it is the wrong tactic and the wrong priority. Now, we have taken a wrong turn here, right, on HE. And I think every time we take a wrong turn like this, it takes us further away from what our members want and what our members deserve. And that's just one example that I've taken out of HE, of something that is happening now. But there are far too many wrong turns that we have taken as a union over the past couple of years. So I just want to put a question to the membership. Do you want to keep re-electing the people who are responsible for those wrong turns, for taking those misguided decisions? Or do you want to put the union back on the right track that will deliver meaningful wins for our members? Thank you.
Thank you, Dyfrig, and well within time. Okay, so I'm looking at the chat bar and the Q&A. We did have a couple of questions that were raised in the previous debate that I can turn to. But they were quite specific questions. So again, I think I'm going to start with a more general question, as I did in the Treasurer debate. And this is around what the candidates see the role of VP as. What is the role of VP? What can the VP accomplish? So again, reversing the order, we'll start with Dyfrig.
Yeah. Thank you. I think the answer is quite simple. There are two parts to the VP's role. Part of it is kind of ceremonial. You know, it's being the public face of the union in some contexts. I mean, we know that the General Secretary is the highest sort of staff officer, but the President, the Vice President is the highest elected officer and often represents the union externally. But the other part of the job, and the part that I am much more interested in, is the internal facing one, which is leading the democratic debate, sort of refereeing the democratic debate within the union. And I am well on record about this. I don't think that our internal democracy works. I don't think that it represents the broad view of our 120 members at all. And I very, very strongly believe that we have to reform our democratic structures. We are coming up to the 20th anniversary of the forming of UCU from its predecessor unions. And I think that this is a golden opportunity for us to have a big open conversation with members about what works and what doesn't in our democratic structures. To give you an example, we've heard talk about Congress earlier. if you go along to Congress in any given year, around half of branches either don't send any delegates to Congress or send less than their allocation. So we've elevated Congress to be this kind of, absolute sovereign body, but almost half of our members are not represented there. So we really need to reset our democracy, and I would like to be a part of doing that.
Thank you, Dyfrig. And just a reminder that when I wave my hands, you've got 30 seconds. So just to bring in Rhiannon on the same question, the role of the VP.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. So on a very, sorry, my email's going off, very practical level, the VP is elected to be a senior lay chair for the union. So that starts for the 2 years that they are part of the sector committee for the union in chairing that sector committee. So it'll be chair of HEC for 2 years, then the chair of NEC. And there's two key elements to that role of chair, really. The first, which I think I emphasised in the introduction, is that proper chairing is about fairness, it's about inclusivity, and it's about upholding democracy. So a chair is there really not necessarily to take a political position within that role, but to facilitate collectivity in the union in making sure that decisions are the ones that are voted for, and those are the decisions that are carried out. That role feeds into being a higher education officer, which includes a negotiating role in being part of the negotiating team in the sector negotiations. So that would be the HE for myself or Dyfrig. It also involves, as Dyfrig's alluded to, a very public-facing aspect of being the senior sort of lay chair as well. And that continues throughout the cycle into president. We are there to cheerlead branches and to advise branches when they're in struggle. So when branches, as is happening now, are being hit by huge redundancies, or when they're fighting or organising on issues on the front foot, the president, the vice president team are there really to be their cheerleaders within the union, to make sure that those fights are amplified, to make sure that we are making sure the messages of those branching are going out and getting the highest traction and engagement we can. So yeah, primarily I would say the chair, the presidential chair function is a democratic one, but it's also very much a mobilising one in terms of we're there to make sure business is done properly, but we're also there to amplify and be a voice for members. Thank you.
Thank you, Rhiannon. So we do have a couple of questions that have come in from various members. One was from Sandy James at the University of Leeds. This for VP candidates. How can we rebuild trust in our union leadership? And I'll ask, again, we'll reverse the order. I'll ask Rhiannon to go first and then bring in Dyfrig.
Thanks, Bob. And I think that's actually a really key question, because there is definitely a sense of a need to build trust within the union for us to really be robust and able to take on the immediate battles that are on our doorstep right now. I think from the point of view of the vice presidential and then presidential position, the way we rebuild trust is by doing everything we can to facilitate democracy in the union. It's not within the president's gift or the vice president's gift to tackle all of the issues that the union faces at the moment. But we are there definitely in a position to have a voice in those and to try and emphasise what we think the values of the trade union should be. In terms of members, I think I know as a branch rep and I know as a regional chair that we have many exhausted activists within our branches. We have members who believe that when a decision is taken, it will suddenly be changed outside of their having a capacity to influence that decision. I think Dyfrig's right as well that we do need to talk about engagement. For me, I think we're moving into a different era. We've got much more hybrid working, much more isolation, and the challenge of the union in building trust is how do we deal with that isolation? How do we make people feel part of a democratic collective where we come to decisions together and where members can trust that those decisions are the ones that will be carried forward? I don't have all the answers to that, and I would be suspicious of anyone who thought that they had the answers to all the questions about how we progress as a union. But I think accountability, reporting back, is key to what all of NEC should be doing. I certainly always report to both Midlands regional committees as a Midlands representative, and as president I would be reporting on all activity in that way. I think as well, we need to think about how we build branch engagement. At BCU, we've used a lot of in a hybrid way. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rhiannon. And the same question to Doffrig.
Yeah, and you know, pretty much the same answer in many ways. You know, I do think that, I mean, I think it's indicative of where we are, that this is a question that comes up, because there is certainly a kind of fractious, difficult relationship between, you know, members and what they consider to be the leadership, and different people consider that in different ways. And, you know, the way of, you know, and trust does definitely need to be rebuilt. There is a sense, I think, among the overwhelming majority of the membership that, you know, this kind of far away thing, like the UCU leadership, just keeps getting it wrong. And you know, and as I sort of intimated in my opening statement, I don't disagree with them. So building trust is about re-engaging with them. But I think that, you know, the problem that we have is that our democratic structures are so dysfunctional that it's really difficult to do that, because you will build up trust in one part of the union, largely because that part of the union will see their decisions being sort of acted upon, being advanced, their agenda being advanced. And then the pendulum swings back in the other way. And then suddenly things are not going their way. They're not getting the decisions that they want. And then suddenly it's a problem within the union. So I think that this goes back to what I was saying previously about the need really to sort of fundamentally look at how we do engage with the members. I think that the current system, like I say, is fundamentally broken. It was built in an entirely different age. And I agree with what Rhiannon was saying about, you know, hybrid working and so on opens up so many more avenues for engaging with members that we have to sort of prioritize those. The problem, of course, and again, you know, I'm going to be sort of nakedly factional about it. There are some people in the union who block every attempt to increase participation through the use of things like e-balloting, and those people are the elected members of UCU left. So, you know, I absolutely think that hybrid working, you know, e-communication is the key. And I've been banging that drum for a very long time.
Thank you, Doffrig. Okay, so looking back through, this was a question that was asked of the honorary treasurers, but was also suggested as a useful a useful question to put to the VP candidates. And this is about how we engage with all of the different sectors that make up the union. So I'll ask Doffrig to come in first.
Sorry, excuse me. Yeah, I think, sorry, I'm going to start coughing in a second. I'm going to try and get through it. It's an excellent question, although I think that it's a question, again, that comes from a historical place that we're not necessarily in. The divisions between all the different sectors were much, much more pronounced, I think, when UCU was set up 20 years ago. You know, the reality for most places is that there is significant overlap between FEHE, adult and prison education. And sometimes it's the same people providing them. And certainly, you know, if you look at a situation like the one we've got here in Wales, where we have moved to really talking about post-compulsory education. We have a single regulator for it. So I think the direction of travel in the sector is going to be, we are going to be naturally, and we already are naturally, working often across FE and HE. And the problem is perhaps that we as a union are lagging behind, because in my day job, you know, I work with the local FE college. I am an external moderator on their degrees. I go along, I talk to them, we develop provision together, we validate their degrees. But from a union point of view, I have never been in a joint meeting with Bangor University branch and Coleg Llanrwst branch that sits less than a mile down the road. So I think that, you know, we as a union are lagging behind the post-16 sector. And that, again, is something that we need to look at. If we are having a kind of roots and branch review of our structures, which is what I would really want, we need to look at how do we bring all the sectors together within our structures.
Fantastic. Thank you, Doffrig. And yeah, just a reminder to people in the meeting to keep the questions coming, but the same question to be put to Rhiannon about engaging with all the different sectors of our union.
Thank you. Yeah, so I think my journey in UCU has been one that's bridged our sectors. I started out working in an FE college in 2005. I moved to HE in 2018, but I work at foundation year level, which is level 3, so there's quite a crossover with FE colleges there. Also, I've been involved, I think I've had about 6 years of chairing West Midlands Regional Committee, but also been a women's officer and other positions and regional delegate. So worked closely with prison ed reps and adult community education reps, like the ones who are fighting in Coventry at the moment, over quite a period of time. I think what members sometimes think is that the FE sector is the Cinderella sector of the union, and then that doesn't even give a look in for prison ed and ACE. And I think I would definitely, as Vice President, be looking to champion those areas. I think what I see as well, and I think Doffrig's already alluded to as well, that there are national differences in how FE in particular sits. So we don't have FE in Scotland, for example, as well. And members aren't always even aware of all the different sectors we represent and the differences between them. And that's something key to share. I think at the moment, the challenge we face actually as education workers, whether that is lecturers, academics, whether it's our professional services members, our prison educators, is quite a holistic attack of education as a public good that has been building and building over a period of austerity. It's now building further with the ramping up of the far right. And we're actually placed well as a united union across these different sectors to take on that attack. And I think that is what I would be looking to do as a lay leader in the union, is to try and see how we bring people together as much as possible to fight for education as a public good. I also sense, because of my knowledge of FE and HE, that there will be a building tide of VCs trying to compete against FE in the post-92 sector in relation to the increasing noise from the Labour government about skills and technical development and employability.
I can ask you
to be ready to face that together. Thank you.
Yeah, I can ask you to conclude. Thank you, Rhiannon. Okay, so we do have another question. Bear with me 1 second. So this is from Anonymous. I mean, in the interest of transparency, it is preferable if people put their names to questions. But this was from an anonymous participant at the University of Sheffield, saying members of our branch have been very concerned about the long-running dispute with Unite UCU, which Rhiannon mentioned in her opening speech. What can the VP do to help resolve this dispute, and what would the candidate's specific approach be? So again, 2 minutes.
Who's going first?
Sorry, Rhiannon. We're keeping with the reverse in.
Sorry, I lost track of the order there. Yeah, so I mean, solidarity with Unite and with all workers in UCU. I think we need fundamentally to resolve this dispute as a matter of urgency, because all of the things we're talking about rely on the work of our activists, but also on the work of our colleagues, friends, comrades who work within the union. And we want the union to be a space where Labour values are upheld. In terms of the specific role of the presidential team in this, the Vice President, as I understand it, doesn't take any direct role in negotiations with Unite. That would happen at the presidential period, which is obviously quite a way away for either myself or Doffrig once we get to that position. And I would really hope that the dispute would be resolved at that point. But what we can do is just be clear about prioritising resolution of the dispute, because ultimately you're elected as a senior lay member to represent members. It's not in members' interest for a dispute to carry on as long as it has carried on. It's not in members' interest to have poor working relations with the colleagues that we rely on and care about so much across the different levels of union UCU staff. And it's not in members' interest for our employers to be able to look at the union as something which is in a state of permanent dispute when we're trying our hardest as negotiators to get them to commit to things which United States they're not getting out of our UCU senior management team at the moment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rhiannon, and well within time. And the same question to yourself, Doffrig, about the UCU Unite dispute.
Yeah, and in a sense, I'm not going to answer simply because I've asked the Unite branch not to involve NEC members in this dispute, and I think, in fairness, I should extend them the same courtesy. This is a dispute between UCU staff. This is a staff dispute and needs to be resolved between staff and management. And I think personally that it is unhelpful for elected lay members to be intervening with the with the exception of the president, of course, who is the lead negotiator. So I've taken the view that I don't think that I should be speaking, other than to say I hope that it will be resolved satisfactorily as soon as possible, and I'm going to stick to that line.
Okay, thank you, Doffrig. So I think we've still got quite a bit of time in this debate, and I'm looking for other questions to be brought in. So please do ask some questions. But while we're waiting for those to come in, I guess I'll throw one of my own in, and this is around which I think both candidates have touched on, but low participation in the union's democratic structures, which, as I think I noted earlier, is sadly kind of common across the UK Labour movement. But what specific strategies would candidates have for getting more lay member participation in our democracy? Starting with Doffrig.
Yeah, I think it's really simple. We have to ask people why they're not getting involved. And that's something that we never do. And I'll give you my sort of view as to why. NEC will never sign off on any kind of survey of members' attitudes, any kind of survey of members' views, because certain people on NEC don't want to hear. They don't want to be told that the membership have views that are fundamentally different to their own. So they would rather continue in sort of blissful ignorance, or kind of perpetuate sort of myths about democratic debate within UCU that's based on them and their circle of friends. So I would say the first thing we need to do is go out there and collect data, not from the people that come to meetings or come to Congress or stand for election, but from the tens of thousands of people who never do, who never come near a UCU meeting, who find them hostile, quite toxic places to be. So we need to talk to people and collect evidence, because, I'm not going to say we're all academics, because we're not all academics, but we are all involved we're all education workers. We're all involved in some way in gathering and sharing knowledge, yet we seem pathologically resistant to gathering evidence about the views and tendencies of UCU members. And I think that's a deliberate choice, and that is one that I would push back very strongly against. And I would very, very much like to encourage us to collect data about how our members feel and asking them the question, why don't you get more involved?
Okay, thank you, Doffrig. And the same question to Rhiannon, practical strategies for increasing engagement.
Thanks, Bob. Well, I think I'll draw first on my own branch experience at BCU, where we have doubled membership fighting two disputes. We're moving into a new one now. Since I arrived in 2018, we've become one of the biggest post-92 branches, but also we've really gone through the roof in terms of our meeting turnouts and built our committee. I think what I would say is I don't agree that we never ask people about why they're not involved in the union. I think when a branch has the capacity to be functional, we have people walking around talking to members all of the time. And that's actually one of the key things that we would talk to people about in terms of what the barriers are in terms of them getting involved. Quite often it's workload. That's the biggest thing that people raise. And I think, though for various reasons, quite often disputes have to be very narrow in terms of how they're focused. I think we constantly need to campaign around workload, facility time, all those kinds of things as a basic demand within our branches. I think when you talk to people about engagement in the union, People join the union when they see it's actually active. So people will often talk to you about their various concerns when you go on office walkarounds. But when we actually get engagement and people wanting to be involved and do things, it's when they see clear messaging at branch level, and the same would apply on a UK level, about what the union wants to achieve, what steps it's going to take in order to achieve those things, and what role they can play. The other key thing, of course, is always going back to members. So as we've built our branch up over time, what we've done is have regular meetings, and we don't try and ever sign anything off or give positions to employers as negotiators without the branch having a full opportunity to be involved in that. And there's a place for both things in that, of branch meetings and surveys. I would never try and do one or the other. I think you need surveys because you need to capture the widest possible participation, and that can include talking to people about what would encourage them to be involved. But we also need that collectivism, that energy and that confidence that comes from a collective space. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Rhiannon. Okay, and we have a question that has been posted in the chat. Vicky couldn't post this in the Q&A because she's one of the co-hosts, but it is from Vicky Blake, Uni of Leeds, on secretary, and as a former VP and president of UCU, I know how difficult the job will be. I am interested in how the candidates will approach resolving disagreement and conflict in UCU, recognising that debate is healthy and inevitable, and the need to maintain a united front when pursuing claims and campaigns. And can you cite any experience of navigating and challenging disagreement? So starting with Rhiannon.
Thanks, Bob. Sorry, could you just repeat the question?
So yeah, sorry, it is. I think to boil it down, it's about how we approach and resolve disagreement, how we manage disagreement within the
dealing
union.
with conflict.
Do we have any previous experience?
It's been a bit of a long day in with our HR team and so on. Yeah. So I think my record is of somebody who has good working relations across the union. I've never been involved in big conflicts. I do have strong political views, but I see anybody who I share a union space with as a fellow trade unionist, and that's always my approach in the way I try to talk to people and engage with people. I've had the experience of chairing quite challenging situations. I wouldn't say particularly at branch level, because at branch level we have really built a really strong collective of people who work together, and I think that's all credit to all the brilliant people I work with. But I have experience at a regional level and at a UK-wide level in the context as a West Midlands chair and equality chair, dealt with quite different views and people who are quite emotionally engaged and quite driven in what they want to say in ways that can mean there's a breakdown at points in the collectivity that we need. I think there are a few things you can do as chair in relation to dealing with that. The first is actually just acknowledging that we are all on the same side and that we are all at points damaged by a system that is very destructive to workers and is very destructive to the things that we try to achieve. It's giving space within the meeting to make sure that people are clear on that, and that there is a need to understand people bring those things into the meeting with them, and that what we have to do is follow clear guidelines about how the meeting is navigated to make sure people are heard, and that the stuff they're bringing with them is not dismissed, but also that we have clear consensus and clear ways of doing things. That means we come out of the meeting stronger and together and able to move forward with a strategy.
Thank you, Rhiannon, and the same question to Doffrig.
Yeah, I can speak from my own experience, because I have been through situations of kind of intense conflict, and as branch chair, and I've got it wrong, and I'd be willing to admit that. So when I was first elected branch chair, we went straight into a massive restructuring here at Bangor, 200 FTE posts at risk, and it was really, and this was in 2020, COVID had just hit. And my wife was 9 months pregnant with our youngest child. So it's a time of intense stress. And, I was branch president, I was lead negotiator, and the outcome for the branch, I think, in one sense, was very good. We got, 200 compulsory redundancies. Nobody went compulsory at the end. So in one sense, we did the job. Took a long time, but what I didn't manage to do was take everybody in the branch along with me, and it caused really kind of quite damaging and quite serious kind of fallout between me and a number of activists in our branch, and I really regret that. I think it's one of the times where I thought that it was best to force something through for the greater interest of the branch. And I don't regret that decision, because there are people still employed at Bangor who would not have been if we hadn't got the settlement that we did. But it comes at a cost of people will not look at me when I walk past them in the corridor, UCU members. So, I've been through it, and I think I know where I went wrong last time, and I know what I would not do again. So look, I know I can be quite a kind of, salty character. I'm quite sort of willing to speak plainly. But also, I think I've learned a lesson, which is you can be plain speaking, you can be direct with people, but at the end, and as Rhiannon said, we are all on the same side. And as I said in my opening address, we all want the same thing. It's about putting us on the right path towards getting what we want.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Dofrig. So I think we're still doing okay for time. So hopefully we can squeeze a couple more questions in before we come to closing statements, and still be done before 2. So we'll see how we can get on. But the next question, and again, this is full disclosure, this is me posing the question, but it's similar to the one that I asked in the Treasurer debate. And it's about the political and policy context, and what should UCU's demands within that context be? And we'll start with yourself, Dofrig, if that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm now going to give away my closing address a little bit, which is so apologies for the repetition. I think that last July the political context changed radically. We previously, for 14 years, had a government that absolutely hated us. Like really, really genuinely hated us for so many different reasons. Now, we might not like the current government very much, but they are categorically different to the previous one. And we do need to be pushing at what is a semi-open door. The problem, however, that we've got is, and I'll be blunt, the current UK Labour government don't think that we are serious people, right? So they are in the process of looking at how to reform, particularly HE. And, we need to make sure that we are in the room, that we are making our voices heard, but that we are presenting them with realistic solutions that they can action. Because if we're not doing that, then the vice-chancellors, the principals of colleges are there, and they are doing that, and it will be their solutions that will make it into policy, that will make it into statute. So I very strongly believe that we have to be a critical friend to this government, much as that might mean holding our noses at times. And I understand, I've said it, I've never been a Labour member, I've never voted Labour in my life, but I think that we have to take this government for what it is, and not being actively hostile to post-compulsory education is a massive bonus considering where we've been, and we have to make the most of that now while the door is still open.
Thank you, Dofrig. And the same question to Rhiannon on the political context.
Thanks, Bob. Yeah, so yeah, absolutely. There is a different political context with the Labour government in place. For disclosure, I was a Labour member from 2010, leaving in 2021, but I did vote for the Labour Party in the last election. I believe we're absolutely in a context where the union needs to be making political demands of the government, recognising that it's a Labour government and not a Conservative government that came before. We need to do that, as Dofrig said, as serious people, but to present ourselves as serious, we do need to have leverage, and that means organising. It means organising in our branch and making sure, and making sure that every single UCU member is mobilised and part of what we are doing in terms of putting pressure on the government. And there's various different ways we can do that. It's not a strike or nothing thing. We need to have different mechanisms. We need to have wide conversations about how we make ourselves visible, make ourselves mobilised in various ways to put pressure on the government. And we do have quite a limited time period, actually. The budget is already upon us. All the signs are that the current Labour government is playing it very, very safe for them, not for us, around HE. It's scared of a populist kind of reform government coming in behind it. And so its interest in HE is really trying to focus things, all the policy stuff is saying, on trimming and trimming and trimming research. We're seeing research being defunded in front of our eyes, really, across our branches, and much more push towards HE as higher skills, higher technical employability centres. And that puts us in direct competition, potentially with FE, if the union isn't agile and nimble and responding to that as a collective. FE has just got a consultation opening. The situation as things stand are that FE lecturers are considerably underpaid compared to their sixth form and school counterparts. There is opportunity there. The NEU have recently taken strike action for their members who were not paid at the same level in the first sort of budgeting around this, and won on that. And FE has a direction to go there, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Rhiannon. Okay, so I had actually missed one question in the chat. So if candidates are acceptable, I'll take this last question before we move to closing statements. We'll finish about 5 minutes later, but still before 2 o'clock. So the question is from Juliana Ojanaka, who is Sheffield College, and it's she's had to run off to teach, but she asked this question: how will candidates ensure the various equalities issues raised by the Equalities Committee remains at the centre of what we do as a union? So start with Rhiannon.
Thanks, Juliana, and thanks, Bob. Equality absolutely has to be central to what we stand for as trade unionists. The standing committees, for any members who aren't aware, we have 5 of them: Black members, women members, disabled members, LGBT plus migrant members, do incredible work really organising around equality issues, and their job is to feed into the Equality Committee, which I chair, which then feeds into the NEC. So that's how our democratic structures work, and members may be aware that there's been a dispute in relation to the Black members standing committee over the last year, which is something that I think our union is hopefully learning from and really needs to move forward from, in terms of how we recognise the right of self-organisation of our equality strands. There's an important phrase, I think, organising phrase, which is nothing about us without us. We need to allow the different equality strands the space to organise collectively together and make demands with the union, and then amplify and take those demands seriously. I think that's core to how we take challenges on. The second thing I would say is that we need to make sure that in the pressing kind of issue of the dismantling of education and the desire to get national bargaining elsewhere and so on, equality isn't put on the back burner as an industrial demand. We need to be clear that the changes in work conditions, pay, anything that we end up fighting for has a different impact based on what characteristics you have, and we need to make that central in our industrial strategy. Lastly, I've said it already, but our workers, our members, our students are international citizens, and they are LGBT plus people, but we are women, migrants, all of those things, and we can't allow our union to even unconsciously reinforce the messaging that's going on in wider society that these things are somehow separate from trade unionism, because they are key to our membership. They're part of what our membership experience, and they're key to the wider issues of equality that are central to trade unionism. Thank you. Thank you,
Rhiannon. And the same question around equalities for Dofri.
Yes, just to reiterate some of the points that Rhiannon made, to be honest with you, I agree that equality has to be at the heart of everything we do. You know, if you know the history of the trade union movement in the UK, it was not always the case that you know, in the kind of great glory days of you know, pre-Thatcher trade unionism, it was often used as a way of excluding, you know, people who were not like me, you know, white men, keeping other people out of the trades. So I think we've taken, giant steps in the intervening years. And I think that, one of the things that we can be proud of UCU of is that we are often within the trade union movement leading the debate on equalities issues. Now, the question about the Equalities Committee, I think that there are sort of two strands, because, there's a big question there about how do we action all of the things that the Equality Committee, and Rhiannon indicated there are 5 subcommittees. It's a big piece of work. For me, I think, is it an Erin Bevan that spoke about the language of priorities being central to socialism. We have to set priorities. We know that there have been serious concerns raised about racism within the union, impacting both members and staff, and there is an agreement in principle to proceed with a review of that issue, and I would like to see that work proceed, an independent review of that issue, and I would like to see that work proceed as soon as possible. But there is also the much bigger issue, which again Rhiannon flagged, which was, not the inward-facing place of equalities within our union, as important as that is, but equalities within our workplaces, because that is where it is fundamentally important, I think, because as trade unionists, we have to make sure that it is there front and centre of any agreements that we come to with any employer, that they take into account the changed world that we are in and the need to take positive steps to ensure that people who are not white men are not disadvantaged within the workplace.
Thank you for that, Doffrig. Okay, so I mean that was all of the questions that we wanted to get through. So I thank the candidates for their participation thus far. We do just have the closing statements. We are doing okay for time. So if candidates want to take up to 3 minutes for their closing statement, I'll allow that before we close the debate. So I'll begin with yourself, Doffrig.
Okay, well, I probably won't need 3 minutes because, as I've indicated, I've already given you mine, really, which is, and I'll expand a little bit. I'm obviously going to take up the whole bloody 3 minutes now, aren't I? Yeah, I think that there are 2 priorities for me, and bearing in mind the vice president doesn't set priorities, but personally, given the choice, what do I want us to be doing over the next couple of years? So one is the political work. Like I say, we are in a historical moment where there is a semi-open door with the UK government. It is so crucial across all 4 of our sectors that we are doing the important work to get policy changes, because a lot of the issues that we are facing are fundamentally policy issues. Right, they are UK-wide policy issues, and they need a government resolution. So, I think that we have to put a lot more resource, a lot more time, a lot more energy into doing that. And I don't think that it is through protest. I don't think that we are going to get what we want by standing outside Downing Street with placards. We are going to get what we want by standing inside Downing Street, having a constructive, well-informed, well-evidenced conversation with the relevant people in government. And the second thing that I would like to do, again, as I previously intimated, is I would like us to look really seriously at how we reform UCU. I do not think I've been involved in so many different democratic and public organisations, from my parish council that I sit on all the way up to big public organisations, and I've never felt that the decision-making structures are so unfit for purpose as the ones that I've come across in UCU. And I'm sorry that that's a negative thing to say, but we are not a well-functioning organisation, and that needs to change fundamentally and radically. And, I will very much, if elected, be pushing this agenda that when we get to the 20th birthday of the union in 2026, that we should have had a serious conversation with all of our members about how we reform the union to make it more democratic and more inclusive than it is now. So that's me.
That's fantastic. Just under 2.5. So thank you for that, Doffrig. And then, yes, turning to yourself, Rhiannon, for your closing statement.
Thanks, Bob, and yeah, thanks again to everyone who's put the work in to organise the hustings, everyone who's attended or who's taken the time to watch along, and thank you to Duffy, Deeper, Andrew as well for taking part in the hustings with me. It's a really good opportunity for us to engage. So I'm proud to be standing with Deeper in this election, and I'd encourage you to give her and other left and non-aligned candidates who support union democracy in its current form your vote. I believe the Labour movement's at a crucial point, and we often are left feeling alone and helpless. And the key message I would want to bring to members is that together we are powerful. Duffrig's alluded to Nye Bevan in the Black Country where I live. Women chainmakers won the first minimum wage by going on strike in 1910. And Mary MacArthur, the great trade unionist who organised the women chainmakers, uses the analogy of a bundle of sticks. One stick on its own can easily be snapped, but bundled together we hold strong. The women chainmakers faced incredible challenges, including isolated work, juggled with childcare, against the expectations society had for them. They won. We must always remember that the strength of trade unionism comes from us going on a journey together. If our approach to organising is that we try to survey people on what they can give and how confident they feel in isolation, without encouragement or support, any union would be snapped twig by twig, branch by branch, along with the sectors we care for so deeply. We must keep sight of the union as not something that is separate from the membership. It's something we're in a continual process of building together in the room and with the leverage outside of the room. Give people the space to contribute, to build together, and give your trust to democracy, and then we're unstoppable. As your Vice President, I'll work to pay back the support I've had from UCU over many, many years and many, many disputes. I will always give my all to stand with members, and I will chair with the respect, the care, and the fairness that members deserve. Whoever you vote for, thank you for voting in the elections, and please do encourage everybody to engage with all the candidate statements and to cast their vote. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Rhiannon. Thank you for the closing statement. And all remains for me is to thank all of the candidates, Andrew, Deeper, Rhiannon, and Doffrig, for their participation. As various people have noted, it is incredibly important that we boost engagement with the structures of our unions. It's incredibly important that we have transparency, that candidates are able to publicly articulate their views and their strategy for the future direction of the union. So thank you all. Again, thank you to the members who've attended and those who will watch at their leisure later. It's been a pleasure hosting this region.